Welcome to What the Flick, everybody. Meredith, Alonso, Ben. We're talking about The Americans, episode, I don't know.
405.
Episode 5 of season 4, Clark's Place. And I've left somebody out. Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Aucoin, Pastor Tim.
Hey, how are you?
Here on What the Flick.
Without the Marjo Gortner hair.
Yes.
Well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Kelly's
Good to be here. You guys are great. I love your recaps.
Yeah, he's been watching the recaps since we started him. Kelly and I go way back. We played high school basketball together. I know we look like a couple of ball players.
That was a really great role.
Yes, we played them on TV.
Yeah.
But
Played basketball.
one interesting thing came up in this episode. Henry, when Matthew comes into the episode with Stan, they say, what was the movie?
Max Dugan Returns.
Max Dugan
That's
Returns
a deep cut.
is playing at the KB, and that was the KB 123 on Wisconsin Avenue, and that is where Kelly and I met. And I'm sitting there watching that episode with him. Kelly was in Oregon, came back to D.C. His father was a congressman, and then spent high school in Washington.
Right. Yeah.
So that was weird.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Well,
I always forget that they live in D.C. It should occur to me that's where Stan goes to work. But
well, a couple of things.
There's so many great references. The Captain 20 reference from some episodes ago, and the June-Ri Karate
commercial.
I took June-Ri Karate when I was at her age.
Nobody bought me Ida. That's how that commercial ended. And there was a basketball game on the radio, which Kelly and I spent a good solid 7 minutes trying to figure out whether that was a real reference.
my God.
Anyway,
Of course had to be the bull.
of course we did, right. So first of all, but not DC set, not shot there.
No, not shot there. It's actually shot about 15 minutes from where I live in Brooklyn, in the Gowanus area. It's that canal you sometimes see separates two chunks of Brooklyn. And I think every once in a while they do exteriors there. They must. That can't be green screen. But I've never been down there.
I don't recognize any of the exteriors.
Yeah.
So and the street signs don't look right.
No.
So I mean they'll put up a Metro bus sign that you guys will clearly put, but it looks like to me that's still not.
Yeah, and that one scene where
and they don't really have any, like you don't see them drive by the White
Jefferson
House.
Memorial,
Jefferson
yeah.
Memorial or anything,
I think
so.
last year I remember they were met by the reflecting pool, and you saw the Lincoln Memorial in the background, season 2 or 3. But you notice you never see street signs. Like they never they
right and when,
them.
right
Because you also you'd have to make them 1982 street signs. Which is
so
Right,
they
very
don't
different.
they don't look like DC street signs when you do catch them in the background, just little ones there.
and let's be honest, parts of New York still look like it's stuck in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, I think Brooklyn Heights sometimes doubles for Georgetown and like DuPont Circle area.
And you were on House of Cards.
Yeah.
You're on Billions too. We'll talk about that later on a different clip. But the House of Cards, they don't shoot in DC either.
No, it shoots in Baltimore. I know. Again, I think they shoot some of the exteriors, obviously down there, but most of it's in Baltimore.
It seems like maybe DC should start offering some tax breaks. Setting shows there, it'd be nice to employ
I'm
people.
sure security's a big giant pain in the ass in general, right? I mean,
I guess, yeah, but it's just not a thing DC is interested in. But the incompetence of city government, long-standing incompetence.
there is that also. Yes.
All right, so let's talk about this episode. We had a big. You had your confrontation moment with pleasant confrontation with Philip and Elizabeth.
Yeah. It was interesting. It was a fun scene to shoot, bringing the Padre in, and basically it was me listening and sizing this guy up and trying to suss out whether or not they were. Can I swear on the show?
Yes.
Oh, by all means.
Whether or not they're bullshitting me.
Oh my God,
Jesus,
Pastor
Not
damn
that word. Yeah.
That's over the line. But it was fun. It was great. It was like I said, essentially just me listening and sussing them out. Yeah.
But you mentioned him, Noah Emmerich, Stan directed this episode.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know that.
So what he gave you some direction?
Yeah, he's great, and it's sometimes it's really interesting to have an actor, a great actor. He's a great actor as a director, and they can give you. They're not shy about just giving you technical notes. Sometimes people be like, "Well, if the motivation in the moment," and you're like, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing." So, what do you want to see?
And actors are more likely to be
Like the light is there.
In this case, apparently, when I was listening to them inside, I was very much like this, thinking that was maybe menacing. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. It just felt natural. And he was like, "Stop bouncing." What do you mean? He's like, "You're bouncing." I was like, "I'm not." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I am." And it's like, when you nod, it gives away your power because it actually looks like you're agreeing, even though I know you're not. I see what you're doing. It's great, except we want to at least get one take where you look like you're not giving where you're not giving anything away. Where we just be still, try it. And I was like, That was fantastic.
Kind of like he has to give us one take, and of course that's what they.
That's
do.
exactly the take that they give. Yeah.
Now,
It's a great note.
Is this that thing for you, like, the joke about the guy in Hamlet who says it's about a gravedigger who meets a prince? Like, do you have to go in the mindset of, like, this is the Pastor Tim show and kind of come in with all this stuff that maybe hasn't been written and no one else will ever know, but that you've created for this guy?
This is a show about turning a young girl to religion.
Yes.
And the godless communists who try to thwart me.
It's a short show, but, it's a good one.
Yeah, exactly. Susie Hunt, who plays my wife, and I, we come up with backstories. Some of it more ridiculous than others. We came up with an idea that we would do a Twerk for Jesus church event, perhaps next season if we survive.
Wow.
She came up with that. But you try to figure out what the history of the people are, and I decided he was a leftist activist.
Oh, you decided that sort of?
I decided that, yes, and I will not going to give away how leftist.
But that's interesting because that's much more. That plays into what they can, like they'll.
Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't say I thought it up and told them, and they were like, "Oh, okay, we'll put that in." It was from early on. It seemed to me that was something that was probably in his past.
Right.
He's obviously politically active, and I came up with specific events that maybe I had.
Well, anyway,
attended.
it works. It works.
Yeah.
I mean, to some extent, it made this bringing in the priest
and
resonate.
I mean, we already had Pastor Tim taking Paige to the anti-nuke rally and stuff. So clearly, Philip and Elizabeth know that, like, they're in the right wheelhouse of, like, it's not like you're sort of a Reagan Christian.
Right, you're not crusading. You're not Ralph Reed.
Which makes it much more interesting. I mean, it probably adds to their feeling of well, maybe he's not all bad. At least they're tending towards the same politics.
Well, and I think that, ultimately helped their motivation of, like, maybe we shouldn't just go and off him because they see a kindred spirit, if you will.
Right.
I also, and then, going later in that episode, that scene with Paige and Pastor Tim, I kind of like to see Paige when she's like, all right, I'm just going to lay it out with you. Yeah. Like, that was what is it like playing with, working with a younger, actress? I mean, she seems on point though. That girl's
great.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like working with a young actress. She's Holly Taylor is phenomenal.
Yeah,
and she's always completely on point, like you say. She plays ball. You change things up. She won't just do what she's practiced. She'll play with you. She's great. She's fabulous.
There was a lot of...
and that was a fun scene where she was like, I'm not giving you anything. Fuck you, Pastor.
Yeah.
My parents want this, but... it's fun.
There's, given how much of television is, what I've called, radio with pictures, where they have to sort of explain everything to you, and in case you're in the kitchen doing the dishes, you can still pick up on what's going on. There were a lot of moments this episode that were non-verbal, that were so interesting, whether it was the whole thing of tailing Martha to the apartment, the close-up on Paige when she tells Philip what he wants to hear and is being very sort of inscrutable, and then that moment, that amazing close-up on Elizabeth where she is figuring out how much Martha really means to Philip.
Right, totally. Right.
Doesn't say a word, but just sort of leans there and like just takes that beat, and I was like, wow, we call out when TV gets to be cinematic, and I think that there were a lot of cinematic moments in this episode.
Because is she thinking, well, now we definitely have to kill her? In addition to being a threat, she's my husband loves her,
right?
Or is she, which some would suggest is evidenced by the sex could go either way. Like, hey, don't forget, I can rock it too. Or does she feel like, oh Jesus, the things we sacrifice. Like now, I feel bad that he cares for somebody.
And I love the fact that the show never spoon feeds you those answers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because we talked about it briefly last night, and I suggested it, and literally everyone shot me down, including you later and everybody on the show. That is Paige a budding spy in that she understood that saying that she told Pastor Tim, on some level, she was like, if I tell them, that protects Pastor Tim. Because if they find out some other way, then they may hurt him.
That she intuited back in episode 1 and 2.
And you guys were like, no, shut up. And so, but then to me, I wondered whether she deliberately, well, clearly it was deliberately, but it was whether there was some spy technique in saying, starting that conversation off with, you know how it's going to make, if the goal here is to make Pastor Tim like me again, the key here is to tell him that my parents made me say this,
Right.
because they're so I always
And to add
so
that-
my note was like, Paige is so smart, like she's like, but maybe it's just her
Right.
an inability to be anything other than honest.
And for her to add, because they like you, maybe as a
Right,
sort of like,
right, because they
she
like you.
throws
No,
that off,
she
yeah,
wants
maybe that-
right. They like you, makes
No,
it harder
I-
for you to turn them in.
No,
Right.
I think it's more that it's less that she's guileless and more that I think she's getting sharper at this.
Yeah,
stuff.
I agree. I
But
think
yeah,
she's
but
learning.
between saying because they like you and then telling Philip, oh well, you know, it's all good, and
Right.
and basically just feeding him what he wants to hear, which is what Philip and Elizabeth do all day, every day.
That's right.
You know, like she's clearly picking up on the niceties of this whole thing. I did want to point out real quick, just because
So maybe she is going to be good at it. I mean, the
Yes,
oddity is
no,
that maybe,
I think
maybe
she-
is
I-
really good.
Either
think
way,
she
and
is.
neither they're not mutually exclusive. Either way, she might be good at it.
That's
Whether
right,
or not
that's
she's
right.
already picking up on the new one, that this might be the way to do it,
Yeah.
or there's something about her straightforward honesty that could be turned into an asset, perhaps.
That's right.
True.
And no, I'm not, and this is not based on anything that I'm
asset.
saying.
He's already talking.
Yeah. And think about
Spy
children.
stuff.
I know
mean,
what spies do.
Yeah, we learn from watching our parents, and this
Right.
is a classic case of a young daughter emulating what she sees in her family, and
Sure.
so she's learning as she grows.
And that look she gives when she's turned away from them in bed when they stick their heads in, I love that scene.
Oh.
It's
Yeah.
a crazy good scene.
Yeah.
But you can't read that either.
No.
It's like I went through with it, I did the plan, or is it numb because she had this confrontation and she doesn't know? I mean, either way, it's she does great work there.
I wanted to give a quick shout out. There's an indie movie out right now that I think is amazing. People need to see it, called Take Me to the River, which co-stars the actress from Deadwood who's in Concussion with Maggie Siff. Her name is floating out of my head. I'm sorry. Anyway, but it uses Under Pressure at the end in a brilliant way. And so when this episode ended with that whole montage, I was like, oh yeah, Take Me to the River. I just wanted to,
All right,
I wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, that was a very judicious pop song usage.
It was, yeah. And timed throughout. It wasn't
Yeah.
just to hit the end, but I
Yeah.
mean throughout. I mean, I just, like a blind man seemed like at an appropriate point too.
And that note where I can't do it, but Freddie Mercury like ascends in the
Yes.
note
Yeah.
as she's hiking up her skirt. It was like, that's great. That's good. How good is the Americans at doing stuff like that? From the pilot with Tusk to this.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
this is a great TV.
So real quick, so Martha, like that. So it's first of all, let me ask you this before we get to Martha, because it'll relate. Because I think Martha, my guess is you live, Martha dies. That's my little you didn't. I mean, I guess you finished shooting, so we won't ask you to. But you now obviously know whether you survived the season. But going into the season, you had no idea whether you'd die in the first episode, right? Like many people thought.
I had a sense of what was going to happen, but that was about a month beforehand. I had a sense.
But prior to that, you thought I could get killed in episode 1 or
Yes.
2? Or?
I had the indications that wouldn't be the case from the Jays, from Joel and Joe Weisberg and Fields. They called me to tell me not to panic after the pilot. I saw them at the wrap party, and they were like, "Okay, you're gonna panic when you see the finale. Don't call us." And I did, and they called me back, and they told me to hang on to my collar for a while.
All right.
Yeah.
So Martha,
Allison Wright.
Allison Wright,
So
who's
good.
so amazing and just
And British. We always forget she's British.
Is that right?
Matthew,
Yeah.
both of them. Yeah.
I don't know, just such great, more compelling stuff. I mean, her loyalty is. I mean, you'd think at some point she just would have. I guess she can't just tell someone. Then
But you would think.
then you go to prison for 20 years.
She's culpable now.
Yeah.
Right.
But you would think, she would just be so tired of it. You know, at some point you would break. Your heart would break.
Also, she could double agent it. I mean, they
Yeah.
could get.
Sure.
By saying, look, I did this. I was told that he was with this office. That's why I put it in. I thought it was another government agency.
She could do.
You know.
She could be a Nina.
Yeah.
Right.
And Americans probably would.
Can we talk about Nina for a second?
I know.
Wait, just one thing. I
Sorry.
think that you started to see those cracks in this episode.
Yeah.
With the
yeah.
weight of it and the strain.
Well, and the
I
fact
can't
that she
handle
gets
this.
one night a week. Like one
Yeah.
night a week for all this,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But no, that was it. Just the Nina thing. You know, we were kind of trying. We were talking before about like didn't seem like they quite knew what to do with her, and they killed her off. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe her death will then lead to something else. And in this episode, her death led to a lot of conversations about Nina having died.
Yes, that's right.
I'm like, okay, well, yes, let's all tell each other. But I'm hoping that I'm giving this show credit that they're laying groundwork for something else, either for Oleg or Stan or
Well, I
somebody.
think we have an Arcady Oleg confrontation because Oleg seemed stunned that that Arcady, although it sounded to me like Arcady was telling it to himself. They don't execute. We don't execute people for no reason.
Sure.
You know, when Oleg is like,
sure
are you out of your mind? Yeah. We do it all the time.
We know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Soviet Union, right?
Right.
But I think we're going to see the double agent in Oleg. I think that's what we're fun. Like I see that crack. He's so disillusioned. Even his dad's like, just go back to your pampering, go back to your American life, you know. And he did. He left.
Excess.
Yeah. All right. What else? Anything else?
Oh my gosh, Stan and Philip and Elizabeth's son. That awkward father.
Oh,
gosh.
Henry.
Yeah, Henry. Like, and then when Stan's kid comes home, he's like, what is this? You know, Ursula doing here in my home? So awkward.
But then they seem to be getting along when they were playing Trivial Pursuit.
I don't know. I think
At least a thought.
Well, that brings everybody together.
Yeah.
Sure.
He just said it was hot.
but when Stan left for work and Henry wanted to stay, he was like, what?
Yeah.
Just go home. Just go home to your family.
Well, and Philip and Elizabeth having that conversation, like, what is Henry doing over there all the time? It's like, well, think about it for a second. Why would he perhaps be craving a father figure in his life when the two of you are out, like, you know, wearing wigs and killing everybody? You know, come on.
All right, so we're halfway through the season, basically.
This is episode 5, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
5 out of 13.
Five
so
out
All right, so we still have
one-third of the way.
Thank God, we have a long way to go. And I didn't get to mention Robert Dalbisson.
Oh,
But I just did.
now you have. Yes. Well played, sir.
Like in an episode where they kill Nina and you realize how barbaric the Soviets were. The fake priest referenced Oscar Romero and the other priests who were killed in El Salvador. Robert Dalbisson was a right-wing death squad leader, and he was paying those guys who killed Oscar Romero. That money ultimately gets traced back to the United States of America.
Yep.
Yeah.
United Fruit Company.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. Vote Bernie. And I think that was pretty clear that's where that connection is, right? Obviously, yeah. Just kidding. No, thanks for watching.